When my parents looked my 18-year-old son in the eye and called him a loser before excluding him from our family Christmas, they had no idea what was coming next. What I did in response changed our family forever, and honestly, I don't regret a single second of it. But before I tell you how I handled this situation, you need to understand the full story. Because what happened next will shock you. Hey everyone, welcome back to my channel. If you're new here, I share real family drama stories and how I navigate through them. Today's story. Well, it's personal, it's painful, and it shows exactly why sometimes you have to choose between keeping the peace and protecting the people you love most. Make sure to hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell, because stories like this don't come around often. And trust me, you're going to want to hear how this ends. So let me paint you a picture. It's December 15, just 10 days before Christmas. My son Jake had just turned 18 3 months earlier, and like a lot of kids his age, he was still figuring out his path in life. He'd graduated high school but decided to take a gap year to work and save money before college. Not exactly what my parents had envisioned for their first grandchild. Now, I need to give you some background on my parents because their reaction makes a lot more sense when you understand who they are. My father is a retired corporate executive, the type of man who measures success by salary figures and job titles. My mother, bless her heart, has always been his echo chamber. They're both in their 70s, set in their ways, and have very traditional views about what young men should be doing with their lives. For months leading up to this Christmas disaster, I'd been noticing tension building. Every family gathering, every phone call, there were these subtle digs at Jake. Comments like when I was 18, I already had direction in my life from my father. Or I just worry he's wasting his potential from my mother. Jake, to his credit, tried to brush it off. He'd come home from family dinners a little quieter than usual, but he never complained. He's always been mature for his age. More mature than I was at 18, that's for sure. But here's what my parents didn't know, what they never bothered to ask about. Jake wasn't just bumming around during his gap year. He was working 2 jobs, saving every penny for college because he didn't want to burden me with student loans. He was volunteering at a local animal shelter on weekends. And he was taking online courses to get ahead on his general education requirements. My son was being incredibly responsible and thoughtful about his future. But because it didn't fit my parents' narrow definition of what an 18-year-old should be doing, they saw him as aimless. The breaking point came during what should have been a simple conversation about Christmas dinner arrangements. It was a Tuesday evening. Jake and I were having dinner when my mother called. She was going through the guest list for Christmas dinner, confirming who was bringing what dish. The usual holiday coordination stuff. I put her on speaker because I was stirring something on the stove. So it'll be you, me, your father, Aunt Linda, Uncle Tom, and the kids, she was saying. I paused. What about Jake? There was this silence, this awful, telling silence. Well, my mother finally said, we thought maybe Jake might be busy this year. Busy? I turned off the stove. Mom, what are you talking about? It's Christmas. That's when my father's voice came through the phone. He'd picked up the extension. Look, sweetheart, we've been talking, and we think it might be better if Jake finds something else to do this Christmas. Maybe it's time he learns that actions have consequences. My blood pressure was rising, but I tried to stay calm. What actions, Dad? What consequences? The boy has no direction, no ambition. He's 18 years old and still living at home with no real job, no college plans. We don't want his attitude affecting the younger kids at dinner. Jake's face across the table. I'll never forget the look of hurt that flashed across his features. But he just quietly got up and left the room. Dad, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. Jake is working 2 jobs and saving for college. He's being incredibly responsible. 2 part-time jobs at a pizza place and a grocery store aren't a career, my father shot back. When I was his age. When you were his age, college cost a fraction of what it costs now. And you could buy a house on a single income. I interrupted. Times have changed. That's no excuse for being a loser, my mother chimed in. And frankly, dear, maybe if you pushed him harder, instead of enabling him, he'd have more motivation. That word, loser, applied to my son. My incredible, hard-working, thoughtful son. I saw red. Excuse me? I said, my voice dangerously quiet. Did you just call my son a loser? If the shoe fits, my father said. Look, we love Jake, but we're not going to pretend his choices are acceptable just to spare his feelings. Maybe some tough love is exactly what he needs. Tough love? I was standing now, pacing in my kitchen. You want to exclude your grandson from Christmas and call it tough love? We're not excluding him, my mother said defensively. We're just suggesting he might benefit from seeing what he's missing out on by not applying himself. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. These were the people who were supposed to love Jake unconditionally. These were his grandparents. Let me make sure I understand this correctly, I said. You want to uninvite an 18-year-old from Christmas dinner because his life path doesn't meet your approval? Don't be so dramatic, my father sighed. One missed Christmas won't kill him. Maybe it'll be the wake-up call he needs. That's when something inside me snapped. You know what? I said. You're absolutely right. Jake won't be at your Christmas dinner. I could hear the satisfaction in my mother's voice. I'm glad you're finally seeing. Because neither will I. The silence on the other end of the phone was deafening. What do you mean? My mother asked. I mean exactly what I said. If Jake isn't welcome at your Christmas dinner, then neither am I. We'll be having our own Christmas. Thank you very much. Now you're being ridiculous, my father said. You're going to skip Christmas with your family over this? My family, I said slowly, includes my son. And if you can't see how amazing he is, if you think 18 years of love and support can be erased because he's taking a different path than you expected, then maybe you need to reevaluate what family means. What happened next was ugly. My parents were furious. They accused me of being a bad mother, of enabling Jake, of turning him against them. They said I was being emotional and irrational. My father actually said, "You're going to regret choosing that boy over your own parents." That boy, I told him, is your grandson, and choosing him will never be something I regret. I hung up. Jake had been listening from the hallway. When I turned around, there were tears in his eyes. Mom, he said, you don't have to do this. I can handle spending Christmas alone. I don't want to cause problems between you and Grandma and Grandpa. And that right there? That response? That's how I knew I was making the right choice. My son was willing to sacrifice his own feelings to keep peace in our family. What 18-year-old does that? Jake, I told him, you are never going to spend Christmas alone as long as I'm alive. And anyone who thinks you're a loser clearly doesn't know the incredible young man I raised. But the fallout was just beginning. Over the next few days, my phone rang constantly. Aunt Linda called to tell me I was being unfair to my parents. Uncle Tom sent a long text about how kids today need more discipline. Even some family friends weighed in, saying I was being too sensitive. The pressure was intense. People kept telling me that my parents were just trying to help, that they had Jake's best interests at heart, that I was overreacting. For a moment, just a moment, I wondered if they were right. Was I being too protective? Was I doing Jake a disservice by not letting him face this consequence? But then I remembered the hurt in his eyes when he heard his grandfather call him a loser. I remembered all the nights he came home exhausted from working 2 jobs. I remembered finding him researching scholarships at 2 a.m. because he didn't want to ask me for help with college expenses. No, I wasn't overreacting. If anything, I wasn't doing enough. So I made a decision that surprised even me. Instead of just having a quiet Christmas at home with Jake, I decided to throw the most amazing Christmas celebration our family had ever had. I reached out to Jake's friends, to my friends who had always seen what an incredible kid he was, to our neighbors who had watched him grow up. I planned the most elaborate Christmas dinner I'd ever attempted. But more importantly, I did something I probably should have done years ago. I started really talking to people about Jake, not to defend him, but to celebrate him. I told our neighbor Mrs. Patterson about how Jake always brought in her garbage cans without being asked. I shared with my coworker how he'd spent his last birthday volunteering at the animal shelter instead of partying. I posted on social media about his work ethic, his kindness, his determination to pay his own way through college. The response was overwhelming. People started sharing their own stories about Jake. Teachers who remembered his kindness to struggling classmates, his former boss who said he was the most reliable employee they'd ever had, friends' parents who wished their own kids had his maturity and work ethic. For the first time, I realized that my parents' opinion of Jake wasn't shared by anyone else who actually knew him. They were so focused on their narrow definition of success that they were missing the incredible person he actually was. Christmas week arrived, and our house was buzzing with activity. Jake's friends were coming over to help cook. My sister, who lived across the country and couldn't make it to my parents' dinner anyway, was joining us via video call. Even some of our neighbors were stopping by. Jake was in his element. He was organizing cooking schedules, making sure everyone felt included, cracking jokes to keep spirits high. Watching him in action, I was struck by something. This young man had natural leadership abilities that my parents had never bothered to notice. 3 days before Christmas, something unexpected happened. My father called. "I've been thinking about what you said," he began, his voice less confident than usual. "Oh, maybe we were hasty in our judgment about Jake." I waited. I wasn't going to make this easy for him. "Your mother and we heard from Linda that you're planning quite a celebration this year. Jake and I are having a wonderful Christmas, yes. The thing is," my father continued, "we realize we might have been unfair. Maybe Jake could join us for dinner after all." Here's where I surprised myself. A week earlier, I would have been relieved. I would have been grateful that my parents were backing down, happy that our family could be together for Christmas. But something had changed in me during those weeks of defending and celebrating my son. "Dad," I said, "I appreciate that. But Jake and I already have plans. You could bring him by after your gathering." "No," I said simply. "We couldn't." "What do you mean?" "I mean that you don't get to call my son a loser, exclude him from Christmas, and then decide to graciously allow him back when it's convenient for you. Jake deserves better than that. He deserves people in his life who see his worth without conditions." Christmas Day was magical in a way I'd never experienced before. Our house was full of people who genuinely cared about Jake, who saw him the way I saw him, as a remarkable young man with incredible potential and an even more incredible heart. Jake's girlfriend came over. Yes, he had a girlfriend, another thing my parents never bothered to learn about his life. His best friend's family joined us when their own plans fell through. Our neighbors brought homemade cookies and stayed for hours. But the moment that made it all worthwhile came when Jake pulled me aside during dinner. "Mom," he said, "I need to tell you something." My heart skipped a beat. Was he upset about missing his grandparents' dinner? Did he blame me for the family rift? "I've never felt more loved and supported than I have these past few weeks," he said. "Watching you stand up for me, seeing how you organized all this. I finally understand what it means to have someone really believe in you." I started crying right there in the middle of Christmas dinner. "But more than that," he continued, "you've shown me what kind of parent I want to be someday. The kind who sees their child for who they are, not who they think they should be. That's when I knew, beyond any doubt, that I'd made the right choice. The story doesn't end there, though. About a week after Christmas, I got an unexpected visitor. My mother showed up at my door, looking older and more tired than I'd ever seen her. "Can we talk?" she asked. I let her in, but I'll admit I was guarded. "I owe you an apology," she said without preamble. "And I owe Jake an even bigger one." I waited. "Your father and I. We had a very quiet Christmas. It was just the two of us, Linda, Tom, and their kids. And you know what we spent most of the dinner talking about?" "What?" "You and Jake. How much we missed you. How empty the table felt without you both." She paused, struggling with her words. "Linda's youngest, Tyler, is 16 now. Do you know what he said during dinner?" I shook my head. He said, "I hope when I'm 18, I'm half as cool as Jake. He's like the nicest person ever, and he always has time to help with my homework when he's here." My mother's voice broke a little. That's when it hit me. Everyone else sees what we've been missing. We've been so focused on what Jake isn't doing that we never noticed everything he is doing. It took several more conversations, but eventually my parents came around. Not because I pressured them, but because they finally started paying attention to who Jake actually was instead of who they thought he should be. My father, it turned out, had been projecting his own fears about financial security onto Jake. He'd grown up poor and fought his way to success, and seeing Jake take a non-traditional path triggered all his old anxieties about economic stability. My mother admitted that she'd been influenced by her friends' constant bragging about their grandchildren's college acceptances and job offers. She felt embarrassed that she didn't have similar achievements to share about Jake. But here's the thing that really changed their perspective. Jake got accepted to college with a partial scholarship. His gap year of working and volunteering had actually strengthened his application. The admissions counselor specifically mentioned his work ethic and maturity as standout qualities. More importantly, Jake handled their apologies with grace and maturity that amazed everyone. He didn't hold grudges. He didn't make them grovel. He simply said, "I love you both, and I understand that you want what's best for me. I hope we can move forward together." That's the kind of person my son is. That's the loser my parents almost wrote off. So what did I learn from all this? Several things, actually. First, sometimes protecting the people you love means being willing to stand alone. It would have been easier to convince Jake to just accept his grandparents' treatment, to keep the peace at his expense. But that wouldn't have been protecting him. It would have been sacrificing him. Second, our definition of success needs to evolve with the times. The path that worked for previous generations might not be the right path for today's young people. Jake's gap year wasn't a sign of laziness. It was a sign of thoughtfulness and financial responsibility. Third, unconditional love really needs to be unconditional. You can't love someone only when they meet your expectations. That's not love. That's approval, and it's much more fragile. But perhaps most importantly, I learned that sometimes the people who claim to have your best interests at heart are actually just trying to force you into their comfort zone. Real support means believing in someone's potential, even when their path looks different from what you expected. Jake is thriving in college now, by the way. He's majoring in social work because, and I quote, "I want to help families who are struggling the way we were struggling." He's maintained his work ethic, his kindness, and his incredible maturity. And my parents? They're his biggest cheerleaders now. My father regularly brags about Jake's grades and his volunteer work. My mother keeps his photo on her refrigerator with a caption that reads, "My amazing grandson." It took a Christmas crisis for them to see what had been in front of them all along. So to anyone watching this who's dealing with family members who don't see your worth, or who's watching someone they love get dismissed or undervalued, don't let it slide. Stand up. Speak out. Choose love over peace when peace comes at the expense of someone's dignity. Because sometimes the best gift you can give someone isn't a wrapped present under a tree. It's the unwavering belief that they are worthy of love and respect exactly as they are. If this story resonated with you, please give it a thumbs up and let me know in the comments about a time when you had to choose between keeping the peace and standing up for what's right. And if you want more real family stories like this one, don't forget to subscribe and hit that notification bell. Thanks for watching, and remember, you are worthy of love exactly as you are.